me choking on a tough pill to swallow. You ain't my baby, so why are you here? Do you wanna save me? Oh, watch me disappear. So down to all my angels, high up above the clouds. I'm with the Undertaker. She's gonna bring me down, bring me down. How hard is it for you to see? I'd want you if you wanted me, but you don't want love, you want misery. It's a fucked up insecurity. I can't live like this anymore. I've been drowning now, watch the storm. Choking now, baby, I can't breathe anymore. Got some noose around my neck again. So long to all my angels, high up above the cloud. I'm with the Undertaker. She's gonna bring me down. Gonna bring me down. Bring me down. So long to all my angels, high up above the clouds. I'm with the Undertaker. She's gonna bring me down. So long to all my angels, high up above the clouds. I'm with the Undertaker. She's gonna bring me down.
Welcome to the Dire Wolf Show, where we believe that America is exceptional and that our constitutional rights should never be infringed. I am Dire Wolf. On our show, we bring you the truth and debunk fake news. If you love laughing at the insanity of the regressive left, sit back and relax. Boy, do I have a show for you.
Welcome back, Wolfpack. Dire Wolf here for our weekly news recap behind enemy lines on YouTube, where speech is not free and the truth is demonetized. For now, alongside me is my co-host Fox Trevise. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. A little cold, but other than that, not too bad.
Cold, as in you have a cold, or the temperature is low.
The temperature outside is cold.
Yeah, we had that problem. Texas had a cold wave not too long ago, but it's already gone. Temperature just changes pretty quickly. So now it's all the ice is gone. So I want to thank all our sponsors. We got a great show for you guys today. This show is made possible and because of you guys and your donations. Is all your fault. Thank you, Kaylette, Ori Main, Nathan, Cameron, Tetris Freak, Slowpoke, Thunder Erican, White Lion, and Timberwolf. Anything we do that might be objectionable in this show happened because you facilitated it.
Definitely. Definitely.
Hey, you see that video of the lawyer and the cat? Did we ever show that yet? Have we showed it on show yet?
I don't know if we did or not, but we definitely can.
All right,
let's
play that video real quick.
I happen to have it right here.
Japontan, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to take
we're
a
trying
look.
to. Can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
I am not a cat. Yeah, so this was I believe a Teams or Zoom. I think it was a Zoom meeting for a legal case, and the cat guy is unfortunately a lawyer, a Catboy lawyer. Whether or not he was representing Tesla is unknown at this time. There was another kind of a follow up to this. Somebody tweeted out that their law class the next day in their law class they had like 20 people on a Zoom call for remote learning, and all of them had the cat filter.
So I don't know if you guys know this. Obviously, a lot of classes are being done over Teams or Zoom, and a lot of business meetings are being done over it. But also, actual legal hearings are not being done in courts. They're being done over Zoom. So that's an interesting thing that happened due to COVID and our reaction to it. But thanks to that, we have the opportunity to have a cat lawyer having an official meeting on a legal case, which is just hilarious to me.
Well, no, Dyer, he was very clear that he was not a cat, because there was some confusion as to whether or not he was a cat or not. I mean, I kind of thought maybe he was, but
I don't know. You always take someone's word when they say they are not something.
I mean, when you got video evidence, I mean, it looks like he's a cat. So
And there's more evidence he is a cat than there is evidence that he's not a cat.
exactly.
So
Well, hey, now you got a perfect chance to use your face rig in your job, Dyer. You just say, well, there's precedent now.
yeah, I don't think I want to open that box.
Oh, that box is well and truly opened already.
But I gotta give some props to this lawyer. He looks, by the picture, he can't be more than like 3 weeks old, and he's already a lawyer.
Yes, very very fast through the ranks there. I did like that his voice is like kind of like sad voice, just like matched this like sad kitten, just
Yep.
sad and scared.
Yes, Howie, that is the joke I was making. All right, let's do our first story.
There's so much evidence of that, Howie. I have you remember those binders Kayleigh McEnany we used to walk around with? The one I got in Dyer just puts Kayleigh McEnany to shame. Alrighty, so our first real story though is the mayor of Del Rio, Texas refuses illegal immigrants. What they're changing the words after I've read them doesn't help. I also read it correctly. What's wrong with you? Alrighty. Dyer just like edits the script. Like after I'll read something or I'll read it wrong that he wrote, he'll go back and edit it after I've gone past it already, because that helps.
Well, I'm manipulating time, you see, and it's now
Yeah,
correct.
you're gaslighting.
And you're
All right.
you're wrong. I'm right.
Yeah, we'll go with that. Okay, so the Del Rio mayor, Bruno Ralphie Lorenzo, pleaded with President Joe Biden on Wednesday to halt the release of migrants into the illegal migrants into the area as his state faces extreme weather conditions and power shutoffs. Mayor Lorenzo said that the city does not have sufficient resources available to house and care for the illegal immigrants flooding across the Texas-Mexico border. Let's watch what he had to say.
Mr. President, my name is Bruno Lozano, Mayor of the City of Del Rio, Texas, and I am pleading and requesting with you to please put a halt to any measures regarding the release of immigrants awaiting court dates into the City of Del Rio and surrounding areas. We do not have the resources available to house and accommodate these migrants within our community. I will have no choice but to use the extreme measure under the emergency declaration as the Mayor of the City of Del Rio, Texas, to refuse the entry of migrants awaiting court dates into the City of Del Rio.
There we go.
And this is a Democrat mayor, by the way.
Yeah, so this is part of the Joe Biden immigration plan, right? So Joe Biden's they've already put a halt on ICE deporting, and then ICE has a secondary policy that if they don't plan on deporting somebody within like the next 90 days, they have to release them, no matter what the illegal immigrant did, if they killed somebody, whatever it was, it doesn't matter. They have to be released if there's no plan to deport them. And because Joe Biden froze deportations, now ICE has to release them. But more so than that, they have the State Department is directing locations such as Lucky, Texas, as dump sites where they are going to be unloading all of these illegal immigrants. Now, you may remember from a few years ago, Trump had talked about possibly running busloads of illegal migrants to liberal cities. And Nancy Pelosi had an absolute meltdown.
Conniption fit.
And she used some pretty awful language, too, saying that they're just dumping something about like gross people, basically. I can't remember what she said specifically, but she was like degrading the illegal migrants, and their quality as human beings because, even though they got a spark of divinity, Nancy doesn't want to be next to that spark of divinity. It smells like trash and BO.
Okay, she has no leg to stand on saying anyone smells like trash when her state is, literally full of shit.
Uh-huh.
But
now basically Joe Biden's doing the same thing in reverse, which is kind of like the general standard. That's been the standard Democrat policy for a long time, is that they've been dumping illegal immigrants into red states, trying to turn them blue, even though illegal immigrants don't vote, technically. But that's why it was funny when Trump said, well, we're going to just kind of switch it up a little bit and we'll send some of them off to liberal cities. If they're so good for red cities, then they'll be even better for blue cities, right? Especially because all the blue cities say, well, we're going to have, we're going to have all kinds of programs and services available. Why wouldn't you send the illegals to a place where there is services available to take care of them, like Sacramento and Los Angeles and all those places, San Diego? Why wouldn't you send them to one of those cities where there's a government willing to pay for all these illegal immigrants? Why wouldn't you send them there? Why would you send them to somewhere like Del Rio that has no resources to handle this right now?
Yeah, and so you said that it's anyone who they can't deport or not plan on deporting within 90 days, which includes now everybody, but also anyone with kids or a family group has to be released immediately, no time in detention. So they're getting there was a detention facility, a small one in Del Rio, because Del Rio is a major entry point from Mexico. And prior to the Biden administration, they had an average of 25 illegal immigrants attempting to cross in the Del Rio area every week. And they were getting detained, and because Trump had the stay in Mexico policy, they're being sent back to in Mexico. And if they're actually seeking asylum, they'd be waiting in Mexico, right? But now that policy's gone. Biden's got rid of the stay in Mexico policy, so now Mexico's not accepting these migrants, and they're just getting released into the city. And now Del Rio's population is 37,000 residents. With 25 additional a week over a long period of time, over a year, that's a lot of people. But in the first week of January, in the last week of January, it skyrocketed to 341 migrants in 1 week, and has been continuing at that pace and growing. Because I don't know if you guys saw the news, there's a surge of migrants coming across the border because the NGOs have been organizing more caravans now, knowing that the restrictions have been removed, and that those same people that might have been refused before are now able to get in. So NGOs are just gathering up people, advertising in other countries, hey, come to America. Free everything. We'll help you get there. We'll help you travel there. And they're helping transport and, brief these people on what to do to cross the border and get into America. They are taking advantage of Biden's weakness and allowing lots of people to come across the border. Also, don't forget, in just 1 week, they had 11 Iranian citizens try to sneak across the border. We have people who are a legitimate risk to our country coming across. We have people who are part of the cartels. We have people who are violent criminals. And we have literal freaking terrorists coming across our border. And because of Biden saying the borders are open, we are at a huge amount of risk. Now, because it's a city with a very small population and services that are meant to service that small population, they are unable to support this huge influx of people coming with no jobs, no resources, and no ability to even communicate properly in many cases. They just are people who need to be given food and water and shelter, and don't have any way to take care of themselves. They are so this is a huge burden on the city that they cannot support. And then on top of that, there's the fact that many of their services are strained or non-existent during the ice storm. So they had buses, a bunch of buses full of migrants that were being dropped off in their city, and they're like, we don't have anywhere for you to go. The shelters were full. They had to sleep in the buses, and they had no food or water for them or bathrooms. So by allowing them to bus all these migrants into a city that cannot support them, they're creating a huge humanitarian crisis beyond the fact that this is bad for our country. In many different ways, we've covered a bunch of times about how it's bad for the job market to bring on unskilled workers, how it's bad to bring in people to cities where the services cannot support them. It's even worse when you're concentrating a whole bunch of migrants into a small area where they have no food, water, shelter, or medicine, and they're not getting like COVID tested or anything. And now you've created a problem for them too. Now they're suffering and the community suffering. This is a terrible, not thought out at all policy. I think that like long term, he's like, I want there to be more migrants in America, but what he's doing is causing a lot of human suffering for a lot of people.
Well, yeah, but that's not one of the Democrats ever cared about that. They don't.
That's the point. Yeah, I think the core of this is he doesn't fucking care about Americans.
Yeah. And on the COVID testing, the administration was asked. I believe it was Jen Psaki was asked at one of the press conferences about. There was a rumor that the State Department said that they weren't getting vaccinated because they didn't have enough vaccine for them, or it was hard to coordinate it because there were so many of them. And somebody asked, isn't that a bad idea? Isn't that a threat to national security? And then Jen Psaki had her classic non-answer of well, she'll circle back to that.
It shows that the Biden administration doesn't actually care about the immigrants. He only sees them as a political tool.
Yeah. I even again this week, I was watching some of the news and Geraldo Rivera. He's pretty liberal on immigration policy, and he's Hispanic himself. And even he was saying the talking point that I thought that the right had knocked down dead for a while. He was saying that we needed to legalize a lot of these people because during the pandemic, the essential workers that were cleaning the toilets for the rest of us, that was essential. And without them, we wouldn't have survived the pandemic. And it was like, Geraldo, we've gone over this before, that illegal immigrants and, foreigners in general, they are capable of doing more than cleaning your toilet. But once again, that's how leftists view the illegal immigrants is these are the people who are going to manicure their lawn and take care of their garden and clean their toilets while they are living in their giant mansions paid for by you, the taxpayer, at everything at your expense while you don't have a job or anything like that. They're definitely not going to hire you to clean their bathrooms.
Actually, I find it pretty offensive when every time they imply that we need illegal immigrants to clean our homes because my mother was a house cleaner. That was her job. She owned a business, but she started out as just a worker. Then she made her own business that cleaned homes in California, nice, homes where they paid a lot of money for someone to come in and clean the entire house, right? That was her job, and she wasn't an illegal immigrant. She was an American who was willing to do the job, and she did it, right? And all the people that worked for her were legal residents of California and the country. She didn't hire anyone illegal. So there's definitely Americans willing to do the job. You don't need to bring in someone who has no job skills and to take up a job from American when there's so few jobs available right now.
Yep. And so now you're going to be pouring on top of which, not new news, but we already having an employment crisis, about to be an inflation crisis, and Joe Biden's going to just blow up the labor market by oversaturating it. And at the same time, he's going to put in a quote-unquote $15 minimum wage, which actually isn't as not quite as much teeth as a lot of people think it is. A lot of people always hear that and they think, okay, well, it's going to be $15, the day after they pass that bill. No, I think he's got a 4-year ramp-up period, which is rather quick, but that is more than enough time to get robots into whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And also, like I said, other companies like mine, like we already, just because of the natural ebb and flow of the labor market in my area, I mean, $15 minimum isn't going to change how much we pay my people. So
some companies have a very small margin, and just a small increase to the individual workers' cost can make a huge difference on how that company can, be solvent, or if they expand or not. So, I mean, it's just one more stab to the heart of small business, and it's out of many he's doing. So he's definitely going to kill a lot of jobs and tank our market.
can't wait. Alrighty.
Fun stuff. Okay, so our next topic is Birdwatch breaks the narrative. So I don't know if you guys know this, but Birdwatch is a fact-checking company it is I believe the owner of it, correct me if I'm wrong, is a Pointer, right?
No.
Is that okay?
No.
Regardless, International Fact-Checking Network.
No. So Birdwatch was created by Twitter. It's like a Twitter project that's in Twitter. The people that are staffing it to start off with, I think that might be the Pointer Institute, but I don't know.
Pointer Institute is a fact-checking network, and they say they dedicate themselves to bringing fact-checking worldwide. They did an article on Birdwatch. Sorry, Birdwatch, yeah, like you said, is on Twitter, and they did an article that was critical of Birdwatch. Pointer tries to, in their own description from their website, they try to set common positions for fact-checking companies and groups worldwide. They set basic standards. They fund fact-checking events, and they have conferences for fact-checking organizations to kind of get them all in sync and grading the same way, to get them all on the same narrative. But really what this all, and they also provide training. They provide official training to groups that want to be fact checkers on how to fact check. And what all this boils down to is Pointer is trying to set themselves as the authority on what is true and what is not true, and they will they give legitimacy. They think they give legitimacy to different organizations, saying, "Yeah, this is a fact checker and this is not." And what they're using the false the idea that they have they're speaking from authority, and that makes their fact checking better, right? Whereas anyone can fact check. We can fact check. We do fact check. Anyone in the audience right now can do a fact check. What makes their fact check good or bad is whether or not it is accurate or not. It's not because they have the authoritative position. But Pointer, the whole reason for this organization is to create themselves as the authoritative experts who then give legitimacy to other fact checkers. And they did an article criticizing Birdwatch. Now,
yeah. So what Birdwatch is, just so you guys know, it's this new feed. It's kind of still in beta, so you might have seen it, you might not have seen it, depending on how they're rolling it out. But the Twitter's goal is to have this rolled out by the end of the year fully. But basically, it'll quote unquote add additional context to controversial tweets. So if somebody tweets something out, saying like Trump did a backflip, then they can use other people who can use Birdwatch to put kind of a sub comment on that tweet saying, no, he didn't, or here's a video of it, or whatever. But it's not a reply comment. It's an actual like embedded conversation describing why the tweet is or is not true in a fact check context.
random members that are part of Birdwatch are given the tweet that's being labeled as controversial or misleading, possibly, and they independently will provide a fact check to it, and they often give a reference saying, "Hey, this is what the person is referring to. It's true, or it's mostly misleading, or partially misleading, or it's not misleading at all. It's helpful." They give a rating to it, right? Now, it's kind of cool. I'd like to having that it's basically your peers have the opportunity to fact check you, not just some nameless organization like Poynter that likes to control the narrative, right? Now, that's actually why Poynter did an article criticizing Birdwatch, because they had lost control of the narrative. Basically, what happened was Tim Pool did a tweet where he mentioned how Time had done a article on the rigging of the election, but then he changed the word for rig. He said, "Sorry, I mean fortifying," and he also used the word conspiracy and cabal, right? So
Which
those
were
are all
words both all used in the article that I think we read that last weekend.
Yes. So he actually used the exact phrase that a shadow cabal had fortified the election for the 2020 election. So that's true. He was almost directly quoting the article he was referring to. And the only thing that he did that was off of the article was he first said rigged and then changed it to fortified, because depending on how you read the article for what lens you're coming from, reality or not, you might say, "Oh yeah, that sounds like fortifying," or "No, actually that sounds like exactly like the definition of rigging." So the thing was, Birdwatch, almost every Birdwatch user that reviewed that tweet said that it was not misleading, and those who did.
And the reason why Birdwatch was even reviewing it was because Twitter automatically froze the tweet. So.
Yes.
Similar to when Trump tweeted out controversial stuff, or one of you guys or anybody, Twitter will freeze the tweet, and maybe you can view it, maybe you can't view it, but you can't interact with it, you can't retweet it, you can't comment on it, you can't like it. And so that's what they did to Tim for basically quoting the Time article.
Yeah.
And then that's what prompted Birdwatch to start fact checking on it. And what did Birdwatch fact check on it, Dyer?
So Birdwatch fact checked that the only real criticism against it, most people say this was not misleading, but those who did say it was misleading or could be misleading was that it was open to interpretation whether or not it was rigging or it was fortifying, and that it was not litigated, and thus there wasn't there's not a solid answer either way, right? So that was the biggest criticism. Now, it was Poynter that did an entire article criticizing Birdwatch, saying that their system is not accurately fact checking because of this whole situation. Now, I think you guys can agree that article was written, and Tim did say what was in the article. So the only appropriate fact check is, yeah, that is what's in the article, and maybe it's open to interpretation of whether you believe it's rigged or fortified, but definitely the exact wording was true.
Well, right? And here's the problem: is that places like Poynter and the SPLC and all the other fact check groups, they will happily reference other Time articles as factual in their fact check. So they will cite Time as a credible source of news.
So why can't Tim?
Yeah. So, but if you do that in a specific manner, all of a sudden it's like, well, you've lost the context. It's you're picking and choosing, and now you're wrong, and now it's all this stuff. So it's only when you do it. It's okay when they do it, but
right. So
and a lot of the fact checks that Birdwatch was having on it was that no, this is not misinformation. This is true. Here's a link to the Time article, and that was dozens and dozens of comments like that saying here's the link to the Time article. Here's the link to the Time article. This is true. This is what they said.
Most of them linked directly to the article. The vast majority of the responses linked to the article. Now, I want to back up one little bit. So when Twitter initially had flagged it as being flagged due to risk of violence, they thought that Tim mentioning that the Time article was going to cause violence. That's ridiculous in my mind, right?
Well, I mean, it might be actually kind of true, but like if it is true, I mean,
Then the Time article was
yeah,
was
exactly.
the one
It's on the Time article because I think that I think if we take the Time article at face value, which I kind of think you should, because I do happen to agree with them. I think that Time was being for true. I think that they were being upfront with everybody when they were describing what actually went on. All of the things that they said happened were receipts that we could verify outside the Time article. It was all stuff that we had seen in real time while it was happening over those few months. We had called it out at the time. A lot of other people had put together like, hey, all these weird things are happening at the same time. It seems coordinated. And the left said, no, you're conspiracy theorists. And then we had the Times article that said, yeah, actually all of those things were related and they were actually deliberately done by a conspiracy, a group of people, a shadow cabal doing this deliberately. And I mean, if all right, so I'll keep just so I can say what I want to say without quote unquote inciting anything. If it was true that a shadow cabal stole the election, I think that violence would be justified. So because Time said what the game was, then yeah, that may well prompt some violence. And if the fact check is, or if Twitter thinks like, well, telling the truth that like we stole it from everybody, like that might trigger violence, I can see why Twitter would want to hide it. It makes sense from their side.
Fox, there's a difference here. So, take it this way. Say that Japan just attacked America, did a bombing in America, and if assume that statement were true, that might make people want to go to war with Japan, right?
It might.
Now, is that inciting violence?
No, it's reporting on what happened, right?
There's a moral difference between that and someone saying that you should go out and punch your political adversaries. You see, there's inciting a riot, inciting violence, and then they're saying, hey, this thing happened, and then people having a normal, emotional, and logical response to that true fact, right?
Yeah.
This is fact-checking. This is not determining whether or not people will be upset by this information. And then the more important part is if it is inciting violence for Tim to reference an article, then the article, which has still been posted on Twitter, should have also been, by the same logic, inciting violence. But it should have been. I'm saying that neither of them should have been, because saying a thing happened that's true is not incitement to violence. If someone is angry about it and then does a violent act, it does not mean the person who said, hey, this true thing happened, incited them.
Yeah. It's one of those hate facts, right? So
No, there's a difference. Like saying you should go attack this person is an incitement to violence.
Yeah.
You
okay.
say,
So the difference between
is not.
Yeah, the difference between like reporting on a bad thing happening and then somebody else is like, well, I should do something about that, or versus you just telling them, hey, go do something about that. So you can the way that Dyer and I look at that is you have to make a moral decision about it, right? So you're
call to
using
action actually is the difference.
What's
the
that?
The call to action is the difference. There has to be a call to action for it to be incitement.
Yeah, I know, but you also, to understand the difference between a call to action and somebody just giving you a fact that you don't like, you have to be able to make a moral judgment about like what it is that's going on there. And you have to look at it with an objective moral lens. Whereas the left has no morality, and they look at everything in the sense of what is good for me. How do I twist the situation to what's good for me? Any morality, it doesn't matter what I analyze this with, it just has to be a good outcome for me. That's why we see the continuous double standard, because depending on the context, it's good for them with one way, and in a different context, it's good with them in another way.
I don't know what is not incitement to violence. After Trump saying go peacefully protest was considered incitement to violence, I don't know what isn't. Me saying, hey, have a good day might now be incitement to violence by that same logic.
No, that's just that's just run-of-the-mill white supremacy.
Oh my God. Having good days is a white thing, apparently.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
Bigot.
Wow. I will never assume someone to have a good day. I want to assume their day's gender. So they went on to, so that spurred their article to criticizing that Birdwatch. Now, one of their biggest criticisms, which in the article, was that not enough Birdwatch users would provide a link in reference to the topic. But that was across all comments, not Tim's. Tim's actually had a lot of people, the vast majority, post a link to the article. But I thought it was kind of dirty how Poynter trying to criticize their response to Tim's tweet was to reference all tweets that are that were judged by Birdwatch and say, oh, they don't use enough.
The Birdwatch is so dumb. It's basically just a sub comment on a tweet. It's almost like the way Gab works, where you can just comment on other things, or whatever that Gab clone thing was, where you could just comment on things that it wouldn't show up on the main Twitter, but if you had that Gab plugin, you could see all the sub comments on it. This Birdwatch is just like that, where it's just like special anointed fact checkers get to have their own comment thread on a tweet, and it doesn't have anything more. There's no more substance to it. What they should have done was make it a form so that when you submit a Birdwatch comment, you've got a little spot to type out what you want to say about it, but you also have to put in here's a spot where you have to fill out for a link to a source, and then you have to describe like where in the source is that. They could have formalized it a little better. All Twitter did was just make a sub comment thread that only special people get to access. It's very dumb. It's very, very dumb.
So only 10% of the tweets that are sent to Birdwatch are then labeled as being rated as helpful, right? And Tim's tweet was actually given the highest rating in Birdwatch, and that's what spurred this article. They were upset that Birdwatch was giving Tim, someone they labeled as being a controversial character, as giving him a helpful rating, and they are saying, oh, well, this is not a legitimate way of doing fact checking, because again, it goes back to they feel like they have the position of authority, and that they control the narrative, and anyone who doesn't have their blessing, doesn't follow their narrative, they're not able to fact check. Well, fuck you. Anyone can fact check. It doesn't have to be Birdwatch. It can be you or me, and you cannot criticize and say we're not able to fact check accurately because for any other reason other than our actual fact check is wrong, and it's not the case. They're saying, oh, you're not really regulated well enough to be a real fact check. You're not part of our organization, so your fact checks are illegitimate. No, your fact checks are illegitimate not because of your organization, but because they're illogical. They are not based on facts or reality. That's what makes you a bad fact checker. It's not because you're a position of authority. No position of authority makes you a better fact checker.
Well, unless you work at the Ministry of Truth,
Well, that's what they want to be. So they're trying to create a single organization that controls all fact checking.
There's been a lot of pointing out that the Birdwatch logo, which you can see at the center of this magnifying glass, it is basically a carbon copy of the eye that was on the Big Brother eye that was on the cover of the book 1984. There was an eye on the front of it representing Big Brother watching, and for some reason Twitter thought that it'd be funny to also make their Birdwatch logo an eye to let you know that they're always watching.
Hilarious.
All right. Did you want to read the rest of this, or is that just...
No, that was just for me to summarize.
Okay. All right.
So we're going to go on to the U.S. child warrior story.
Yes, we are. We have having child soldiers now. It's very exciting. So this was a story that kind of blew up, I think, late last week, kind of early this week. And it was actually not about child soldiers. Or that's what a lot of people thought, that it wasn't about child soldiers. But here at Direwolf Media, we went the extra mile and found the truth of it, that this was a ploy to get child soldiers as young as babies into the military. So this all started with a announcement by the Army that they were going to be doing another revision of their physical fitness standards. They've already famously, all the branches have famously already adjusted their physical fitness standards to allow women to have an easier time at passing the tests. And I think also different age groups already have an easier time at passing the test. Am I wrong on that one, Dyer?
Yes.
Okay.
That is correct.
So yeah, so we already have within the military a kind of an equity model where we're not looking for a particular standard. We're looking to get people across the finish line, no matter how old or what gender they are, which is already a problem. But last week, the Army announced that they were going to go even further with another revision to the physical fitness test. Let's see here, Major General Lonnie G. Hibbard of the U.S. Army said, quote, you can't just start this in the middle. You got to put some.
That was the full.
There was.
Sorry.
I know that there was something before that, and wherever you copied this from, there was something before that that gave context before the quote started. You can't just start a quote in the middle of a sentence. I sound like an idiot. All right. So quote. I'm guessing the Army is doing some great work in the new physical fitness test with a proper workout regimen focused on the fundamentals. Any soldier, regardless of age or gender, can hopefully accomplish this. That wasn't even the quote I wanted. Where was the one about the...
So the quote I was looking for, sorry, that was the wrong one, was he said that he wanted to fitness test for the a gender and age neutral battlefield.
Okay, hold on, stop. I had a whole plan for this, and you're ruining all of it, Dyer. All right, we're gonna restart. So the quote was talking about, as Dyer just said, it was they wanted to make a new physical fitness standard to encourage a age and gender-neutral battlefield. Now, if you listen to any right-wing commentary the last 2 weeks, a lot of people picked up on the gender-neutral battlefield and talked about how ridiculous that was and what does that even mean and all this stuff. I actually, at the time when I heard it, I had floated the idea to Dyer that perhaps we should have a draft for transgenders, and not a draft for anybody else, just transgenders, because we want to make sure that there's equity in the representation in the military, and the only way to accomplish that is through forcible drafting
and parity.
Yes, and parity. So we need to for every man we need to have a woman and a tranny, and we need to draft women and trans until we get that parity. I think that's a perfectly fine idea.
And if they're saying that there's 82 genders, wherever the number is now, we should have an equal representation of all of those genders. So, and if there's not enough that are, just volunteering, we have to forcibly, draft them into the military.
Yes, preferably at gunpoint. Okay, so again, like I said, everybody picked up on the gender-neutral battlefield. But what I picked up on, and I think that the sleeper part of the story is the age and gender-neutral battlefield. So the age-neutral battlefield. The Army is calling for an age-neutral battlefield. Now, you might be thinking, hey, Fox, they probably mean old people. And you know what? They might mean old people, but that's not what they said. What they said was age neutral. When I hear age neutral, that goes up and down.
And down.
And down. So, in my opinion, this week, the Army has endorsed and is planning to have child soldiers. I don't know how else you could take the age-neutral battlefield. I mean, a lot of our enemies already have an age-neutral battlefield. They have no problem with child soldiers, so I guess maybe we have a plan to fight fire with fire. I don't know. I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm just telling you the news.
Yeah, our enemies also rape and pillage. I don't think we should copy them. No, what they're talking about is a new fitness regime that they're trying to make a single standard to apply to everyone, but they failed. They have to do tiers for ages and for genders, because the result of the study of this new PT thing was that, surprise, surprise, women were far outperforming the men and could not meet the same average standard, and they had to have a different if they're going to keep women in the military, they had to have a lower standard for them. And a few examples, by the way, imagine young babies have to be able to pass this test too. They have a deadlift you have to do now. So imagine an old toddler doing a deadlift.
Yes.
The average man was able to deadlift doing repetitions of an average of 238 pounds, whereas the female's average was 160. Not even close.
Well, so Dara, one of the problems with having women in combat positions has been that they're on average, it is assumed that they don't have the upper body strength to carry one of their male comrades out of harm's way. Now, if we have more child soldiers in the mix, then all of a sudden the women become viable and they can actually carry a child who's been shot to death out of the combat zone.
Yes, that's the strategy. We'll make our soldiers smaller, and now the women can carry them.
We'll also save a lot of money on uniforms because there'll be less fabric.
Less fabric. Yeah, you're right. You're terrible.
I am a patriot, Dyer. I am following the military standard. You're an age bigot.
Yeah, no one is too young to die for their country.
Yes.
Jeez Louise. In my job, we regularly have to lift 100 pounds over our head and put that 100 pounds up on a shelf at 100 above head level, right?
Would it be so much easier to lift an 80-pound 9-year-old?
Yes. So the problem is, if you have a short female, which we do, they literally cannot lift 100 pounds and cannot reach the shelf. So I have someone who's assigned to my unit who just can't do the job. And I talked to my father before this show about this physical fitness test. And he was career military in the Army. And I asked him how I felt about this. He says, I basically agree with what I think is, what they're trying to do is set a single standard at the highest level of the military and try to apply it to everyone. It doesn't make sense. All of these things they have us doing, like doing a standing throw of a medicine ball, a deadlift, requires that units have weightlifting equipment to do a PT test, where previously a PT test required you to have just the person. All they had to do was run, do push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups. You didn't really need to have a whole lot of equipment for that, right? But now they've created an additional cost and a limitation of how many people you can actually test at one time because of the limitation of equipment. And not every job in the military has the same physical requirements. There is the mission essential tasks that each job has that each commander should be empowered to test have a general idea of your PT test has to fit in with this just general parameters, but have the test actually fit what they do. If you're a mortarman, can you lift those ammo cans and put them up on the truck? Do you have the strength to do that? Can you run this 2 miles in this amount of time to show that your cardio and your heart is healthy enough to serve, right? Do those kinds of things, not have them do CrossFit if their freaking job is a desk job. Right?
Do you think that some of the universal PT standard, do you think some of that's just linked to tradition, that in the past when the military was a little bit simpler, right? In the modern era military, all the different jobs are all very specialized, just because of modern technology and stuff like that. But even going back to World War I, there was not a lot of stuff to do when you joined the military. It was kind of the one thing they were going to do to you was put you in the trenches, and that was that. And so to whip through recruitment as quickly as possible, they had this kind of universal standard for PT that they could do testing on really quickly. And as we've moved into the modern era and all the jobs became specialized, they kind of just retained that one standard, even though they didn't necessarily need it, or it might have been time to revise it, and they've just never been revised.
So the Army, the Navy, the Army, the Marines, and the Air Force all used to have almost exactly the same type of training because they all were riflemen. The early Air Force was a component of the Army. The Army was, everyone was had to have the combat capability. So they all went through the same kind of physical fitness training and had to maintain that level of readiness. But as time's gone on, as you said, the Army has become far more technical and has developed technical jobs that will not likely be in combat ever. And the Air Force has broken off and become extremely technical, and it now has cyber warfare, space warfare, and
No, not space
intel.
anymore. You guys are
I'm
out of
sorry.
space. Yeah.
We're out of space now. I take that L. So no, not space, but that was one of the things.
The Navy will get their spaceships soon enough.
Probably,
Don't worry
because-
about it.
So they become so technical that they're no longer all riflemen, and they haven't been that for a long time. So you have a problem where you're having people who have desk jobs go through that same kind of training, but you have there's two problems with having a standardized top-down fitness regime. Is that you are making some people who don't need that level of fitness be held to that standard, but also people who could have a higher level of fitness are not being required to meet it, right? So you could pass the Army, the basic fitness test, but not be strong enough to carry a person in combat, right?
Yes.
The current test, a female could pass it, but not be able to pick up one of the guys they work with.
Yeah.
So,
so
that
like,
fitness test is not helping people actually do their job.
Yeah, so like you said, there's already a curve on age, but now there's going to be an even steeper curve on age where it gets pretty easy pretty quick. Didn't you say like not even really that old, like mid or late 30s? It was like only like 18 push-ups that you had to do in a row.
For a female, yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, which I responded when you were telling me about that. I was like, well, like I could get down and do 18 push-ups right now, and you said, well, yeah, it's not that hard. I was like, exactly, that's my point. I can do 18 push-ups in a row, but I'm not physically fit enough right now to go join the military. So, like, that's my point. If I could do it, but I know I'm not fit enough to go join the military, that's a problem.
Right. So you have some commanders who are like, okay, this is the fitness test, but that's not enough. And that's the problem. Like, they shouldn't be saying, like, a commander should have the ability to say, okay, yeah, that might be the bare minimum, but for my unit with my mission, I need a higher level standard. And lower level commanders are not empowered with that right now to have a fitness test that fits the actual job. That'd be far more effective.
They should go. I know that they won't because the upper level leadership is woke as fuck. But the military really should have just gone the other direction and said, no, actually, we're going to make the fitness standards harder, and we're going to make new patches that have little numbers on them, and you're going to wear on your chest how many push-ups and how many pull-ups you can do. That way you can just look at somebody and know whether or not they suck or not.
And so having the a top-down fitness standard it involves all that politics of, we don't want to have an equitable outcome, so we're going to have to make lower standards for these different groups to make sure that they can pass. Well, if you actually tie the fitness standards to a task, right? Like in my case, if you can't lift 100 pounds at 6.5 feet, then you cannot do the job. Thus, you are being excluded from this job. Maybe you're fit enough to do a different job. Maybe you're tall enough to. I don't know why they assign someone who's freaking like under 5 feet to my job. I don't get it. Doesn't make sense. You just physically can't reach it. Some people have to like get a jump. They do like a squat and jump up and throw the thing up there. And now they've thrown 100 pounds. If they miss, it falls on them.
Yeah. I wonder if, and I don't know what the route would be to go for it, because somebody who's already enlisted has kind of modified legal rights, especially when it comes to military things. But I wonder what the efficacy of making a case that to the DOJ saying the military is being gender discriminatory now because according to quote unquote leftist science, there is no difference, but there is no biological difference between men and female, and the military now has institutionalized that women are weaker than men by making their standards lower. That, I think that's a DOJ case, and I think that they shouldn't do that. Yeah, I do believe that. I think that they shouldn't be having a different standard. If there's women that can meet that standard, then by all means, let them go do their thing. If they can't make it, though, I don't see why you would put them in harm's way, because you're also, and again, kind of retrotting, I think, pretty well-trod territory right now. I don't think I'm saying anything that nobody's heard before, but having somebody who's not fit enough to do the job in those situations, you're putting their fellow servicemen in danger, and then they're also putting them in danger. It's the same reason why you wouldn't put a child soldier into a battlefield condition, because you know that they're going to get hurt and that they can't handle it. Why would you put somebody who maybe isn't a child but also is not fit enough to handle the challenge? Why you're just setting them up for failure, probably death.
Here's an example. There's these are two infantry personnel, right? One's a normal sized male, one's a female, small friend of mine, right? The male, 7 deployments with regular combat loadout and no injury to his knees or legs from weight. My friend, who I'm not going to name, but she is active on social media. You probably have met him. After one deployment, severe injuries to both knees, and was medically discharged because of a normal combat loadout. That's the difference right there. You're not only damaging the mission, you're harming the person. It's stupid. That person was way too tiny to carry that much weight in and out of a vehicle all day. Their joints were not made to carry that much weight. It was half their goddamn body weight. Sorry, I'm heading the table again. It doesn't make sense. You should have a task-oriented fitness standard and size, honestly.
Triumvirate, if you have to ask, the answer is no. You'll know when you no longer have anyone to ask.
Yeah, when they come for you,
Yeah.
you'll know that you're too late.
Yes, when it's when you realize that you no longer need to ask permission, that is when it's okay. If you still feel the need to ask permission, it's not time yet.
All right. So a few examples of how the Army is sexist. They noted that men were able to throw a medicine ball an average of 9 feet, while women could only throw it 5.5 feet. Men were able to do an average, by the way, this is really low. I'm kind of disappointed. Average of 34 push-ups in a minute, where females were able to do an average of only 20.
I can do 34 push-ups in a minute.
I know. That's not a lot.
But I couldn't do Army stuff. Well, maybe I could. I guess I don't know. I guess if it's, I don't know. Maybe all this stuff just isn't as hard. That's what that's where they're failing on the recruitment, right? Is they're action adventure, save the world and all this stuff. And it's man, that sounds really goddamn hard. I'm not going to enlist. If they were yeah, you got to do 34 push-ups, I'd be I could do that.
Men were able to do an average of 8.3 leg tucks, which is when you do you're on a pull-up bar and you pull your knees up to your chin.
That's almost to your chin?
Yeah.
How do you get your knee to your chin on a pull-up bar?
Both your knees up to your chin.
That sounds harder than a pull-up.
You're not doing a pull-up. You're doing a crunch in the air.
That sounds harder than a pull-up.
Yeah, it is harder than a pull-up.
It's a totally different muscle group. It's okay, you have to do push-ups, and then girls get to do leg lifts. It's not equivalent. They're different things.
It's called a leg tuck. I never said pull-up. So men were able to do 8.3 leg tucks, but females were only able to do 1.9, which is ridiculously low. But also, what is 0.9 of a leg tuck?
I think on average, Dyer, you fucking dork. After the show, I want to go do a leg tuck and see how many standard deviations and in which direction I am from being a female. This is what we should do. We should make these use the Army averages to determine gender. Okay, gender's non-binary, it's on a spectrum, but you have to do, if you want to be trans, you have to do the Army test and see where you land at in the numbers to determine if you're closer to a man or a woman based off which average you land in.
So Trevor accurately points out that tucking with your legs is pretty gay.
We'll have to give it a try. What makes it gay?
I don't know. I thought it was funny. Up to the tits. Yeah, I guess tits probably are an obstacle to a leg tuck, honestly.
I've been doing a lot of static holds with my arms out, trying to so I can hold my rifle up longer.
Good luck with that.
Because it's heavy.
Oh my god.
Yes.
All right, so enough on that topic. America now has child soldiers, maybe.
Yes. Well, the plan is to have child soldiers, right? Again, so we
Working
talked a
towards
lot. We talked a lot about the gender neutral battlefield, but the age neutral battlefield. They said age neutral battlefield. Don't forget that. When they start drafting, 8, 5, 4-year-olds, you'll remember Fox told you this was going to happen. Fox told you the Army was going for an age neutral battlefield. I also think that this means that enemy combatants or military age males can now be as young as just born. So
Yes. I guess it's one form of abortion, I guess. But as a economic conservative, I'm like, hey, this is a great idea. We're saving money on uniforms.
hell yeah. All right.
Next story.
So, our next story, time travel. Okay, so we have a kind of an observation, not really a story, maybe a collection of stories, but this pattern that I'm starting to notice. And it's kind of in the under the umbrella of historical revisionism, which is something the left loves to do. But specifically, I've noticed this tactic of what I'm going to call sequence manipulation. I was calling it time manipulation, but that makes it sound like something much more interesting.
Time wizards.
Yes, but sequence manipulation. So by subtly changing the sequence of events in mainstream reporting, so there'll be an event, something will happen, and the mainstream media will report on it. But in the reporting or in discussions afterwards, commentators on the left or political analysts and stuff like that, or politicians, when recalling the event, they will change the sequence of tiny details within the event, and that changes the cause and effect context of that event. Just swapping the order of these minor details can change everything about how that event is being interpreted. So we've got some examples. So one example of this is AOC. She shifted the time in her retelling. She shifted the time that the Capitol riot happened forward by about an hour, so that it fit with her timeline of her quote unquote harrowing escape from the office building that she was in. If you'll remember, we went over this a few weeks ago, but she told a story about how, they were coming in and they were, she was running around her office building and she was hiding in closets and stealing people's shoes. And she was very terrified because, there were Trump supporters in the lobby and all this stuff. And she actually volunteered herself a timeline of the event. She said that these things were happening between the 1 and 2 o'clock range. And we know now that the rioters didn't breach the Capitol until I think like late in the 1 o'clock hour, early in the 2 o'clock hour. I think it might have been like 2:15. But AOC shifted that detail. Again, she just shifted forward a little bit so that she could tell a story. And it changed the context of her story. After we realized what she was doing and called it out, we realized how idiotic she was, and that at the time that she was doing all this freak out, the Capitol had not been breached. And in fact, Congress was still in session, and she was actually just giving up that she had skipped Congress that day. But that was an example of where she changed a little detail. It was all stuff that happened, but she moved it by about an hour when she was retelling it. This doesn't seem like a lot, but it totally changes the context of the events that day, for her at least. Another one is that the officer that was said to have died at the Capitol riots, in fact, died more than 24 hours later. It was almost 30 or 32 hours later. And his injuries that he died from weren't injuries from that day. It was just I believe the coroner said after the autopsy that it was a stroke of some kind, but that it wasn't related to being bludgeoned. Also, he was never actually bludgeoned. There was no evidence that he'd been bludgeoned. And they also had text messages that this guy the night after had been texting and calling his friends and family saying that he was okay. He had only been pepper sprayed, but it wasn't a big deal, and he was doing just fine. But for more than a month, and even during the impeachment trial, the mainstream media and the politicians kept saying that he died as a result of the riots, and they shifted the time that he died by about 24 hours to try to make it seem as though he died as a direct result of the riots and that he was killed by the Trump supporters. Again, not, moving a historical event by about a day, it doesn't seem like a lot. I mean, but it massively changes the context. You're talking about a death that they used as evidence in the impeachment trial against Trump that didn't happen in the way that they said it happened. And the reason why they used it was because they were trying to do this sequence manipulation by shifting it to a more convenient point in the timeline that followed their narrative. Let's see here. Another one is that Joe Biden, just last week, he shifted the time that the vaccine was developed by about 2 months. Biden said that there was not a vaccine when he took office, that we had not developed a vaccine when he took office. Now, we all know that that's not true, and Biden should know that that's not true because Biden had been vaccinated about 6 weeks before he took office. So, that's I'll give it to him. He probably did forget. So I don't think he was lying. He might have legitimately thought that, but it is the mainstream media defended it and said, well, he really meant this, and that. But that was an attempt. I think a much less successful one than some of these other examples we have. But that was an attempt by Biden to shift the sequence of when the vaccine was done to fit his narrative that Orange Man was bad and he was good and he was going to save America. And that it makes a big difference as to when the vaccine was developed because the left kept saying that it was never going to get developed under the Trump administration. And then Trump, with Project Warp Speed, was able to encourage the free market to develop it. And we started getting it pumped out. But Biden tried to shift the narrative to try and make him look better and make his political enemies, which is us, look worse. Let's see here. We also have Trump inciting the riots with his speech, but the riot started before Trump finished speaking. So this we didn't know for several weeks after the Capitol riots, before some people were able to sync up the timelines, the timestamps on the videos of Trump speaking with videos of when the rioters breached the Capitol doors. And what we found out was that it was like 3 to 5 to 7 minutes before Trump was done speaking when the doors were being breached. I think it was about 2 minutes before Trump finished speaking when they actually breached the doors and got inside the Capitol. But the left, the mainstream media, they just shifted just those tiny little bit, just a little bit. They shifted the sequence of events to say that the breach happened after Trump's speech, because if it happened after Trump's speech, then the cause and effect is that, well, Trump caused this to happen. He incited the violence. If you look at the reality of it, where the sequence is backwards, where, the real sequence was that the Capitol was breached and Trump was still speaking, then you can say, okay, well, it doesn't seem as though Trump was inciting the violence because they weren't listening to him. They were already being violent. So whatever violence they had, it wasn't from Trump because they weren't even listening to Trump. So just, again, what I'm going through here is just it doesn't take a lot. And one of the things that's dangerous about this is some of these are longer, like the vaccine one, 2 months. That's a pretty big shift. That's pretty noticeable. But stuff like AOC's story, where she's only moving events around by about an hour. And with the Trump speech, you're only moving it around a couple of minutes to get that sequence to change. And when you're right in the moment, there will be people who were there or who were watching or who were paying closer attention to what time stuff was happening, who will know and call that out and say, hey, no, you got the sequence of events wrong. It is flip-flopped. But if you look at the stuff, if you think about kind of the longer term aspect of this, next year, are you going to remember? You probably will because you're watching this show, but are other people going to remember or even be able to figure out that the Capitol was breached 2 minutes before Trump got finished speaking? When you're a year out, just that tiny detail of a couple of minutes a year ago, you're not going to have any way of being able to parse that out. You jump out 10 years, and all of a sudden 10 years you're going to have in the history books, well, Trump talked, and then after Trump got done talking, he incited the riot, and then they breached the building. But you'll know, well, no. That's a big difference. It's a huge difference from the actual sequence of events. 10 years from now, that 2-month jump that Biden did with the vaccine, if they maintain that in the written history in the quote unquote papers of record, 10 years from now, you might look back on this and say, well, man, I can't really remember when the vaccine got developed. I've got all these sources, and Wikipedia says that it was developed in, late January after Biden took office. And I kind of remember it being developed in December, but maybe I'm wrong. And so they're setting the groundwork for having revised the history in real time. Now, we've got examples like the 1619 Project, where they're doing historical revisionism on a much grander scale over a much deeper period of time. But this is an example of, because of the way technology and information flows and media and all that stuff, they can actually start editing the quote-unquote editing the timeline, revising the history in real time. And it doesn't take a long time for you to get away from these events. And all of a sudden, we've all forgotten what the actual sequence of events is. And even if you do, 10 years from now, even if you do remember that Trump was still speaking 2 minutes after they had breached the Capitol, you might remember that, but you won't be able to find any details to support it.
And when your kids are looking to look up history about what happened, there'll be lots of news articles that have said the lie, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there'll be no articles correcting it, and the news is curated to only show what they want you to see, so they can change the historical view of what happened by controlling what information is available. Even though in the right now, it's you guys know that Trump did not say that at Charlottesville that the white supremacists were good people. You and I both know that. But there is literally like hundreds of articles and official statements in Congress that are recorded saying that he did over and over again. It is historical fact as far as the news is concerned. Even though it's been debunked, those debunks will not be viewed by your children doing research papers 10 years from now.
Well, they won't be available. You won't be able to find them.
Exactly. You'll only see the sources that say that he did say that, even though it's factually false.
And so this is where you're getting that groundwork laid right now, where right now, all of the examples I've just gone through, those really, thank God for so much conservative commentary. It does exist within those. But again, I don't think that those are going to be available into the deeper time of the future. But what you have now is you've got a lot of this information that I said kind of exists in the common memory, but it doesn't exist written down or in a database somewhere. It just
generational knowledge, though.
Yes, and so as we you just wait out humans, all of a sudden you lose that memory for one reason or another. But then again, you think about this 100 years from now, looking back on this period, they'll say, well, Trump had a speech. Then there was a riot and they breached the Capitol right after. And 100 years from now, there's not going to be anybody left that remembers, well, hold on a second. You had an event there that was 2 minutes swapped with a sequence change. And even if there was somebody who tried to research that time 100 years in the past, they're probably not going to be able to find any articles about it.
It's kind of like in China. The first dynasties, the first two dynasties of China are well. It's well documented that it's a lot of fantastical things are said to have happened in their history, because the people who wrote the history wrote things that people know are fantasy and probably false, but they can't prove otherwise. So it is their only history, and for a long time people believed these fantastical things because it was their only written history, even though it was fake.
Well, here's the other thing too, is the kind of nefarious part about this is like these aren't that fantastical. It's just, again, you're taking events that really did happen, but you're just shifting a little bit the timeline of when they happened. Again, 2-3 minutes, an hour, a day, a few months. It's not a long amount of time when you're looking at this in the time span of years. So this is kind of one of the most insidious parts of it, is that, obviously the best way to tell a lie is to mix it up with the truth. And they're using a lot of truth. They're using true events that happened, but they're just by swapping the order of them, it changes the cause and effect relationship. And then they can build their narrative on that. Well, if the Capitol was breached before Trump got done speaking, it's like, well, the Capitol rioters probably really weren't that interested in Trump. Otherwise, they would have been listening to him speak. And so therefore he wasn't inciting it, et cetera, et cetera. But if you make it, well, Trump got done speaking, he incited them into a riot, he told them to go to the Capitol, and then after that, they breached the Capitol. Well, then you've got the narrative that we've got right now where Trump incited them to go breach the Capitol, and it was all his fault. So it's that cause and effect relationship. And so I've started to notice this more and more and more. We got a few more examples that we'll get through here, but I want you guys to also start looking at this too. I'm sure that somebody in academia has formalized a name for this. I'm sure it's like a type of lie or a type of propaganda. I'm sure that there's something about that, or there's probably some kind of Orwellian term for it. I haven't been able to find that, but what I'm calling it is sequence manipulation. So I want you guys to be cognizant of that and be paying attention as things happen, especially these kind of real-time events like the Capitol riots and stuff like that. I want to make sure that everybody's paying attention to that and try to catch this, because they seem to be doing it a lot, and I'm betting that they've been doing it for a lot longer than what I'm thinking they have, and that makes me very concerned about some of the things that we thought happened throughout the history.
The White Lion is referencing that Dinesh D'Souza said that is fake news becomes fake history.
Yes, it is. That's what they're trying to do. Let's see here. So we also had the little bit further back was images. And actually, images is a big part of this category of sequence manipulation. There's a lot of situations where the left and the media will take a picture and then they will pretend that it was taken at a different time. So we have
Kids in Cages.
Yes, so Kids in Cages is one where you had a picture that was taken during the Obama administration, and the media revived that picture and said that it happened during the Trump administration. It was a sequence manipulation, trying to say, well, this happened under Trump, and therefore it belongs to Trump. We had that with just a few weeks ago, there was a picture of Kids in Cages saying that, this is how the border guards are treating them, this is why Biden needs to save them all, and the picture was not actually a sequence manipulation.
Palestinians.
It was from a completely different country. It was a geographic manipulation. And then we also had, this was something that they did over and over and over again at Trump events. They would, media would very commonly take pictures, a couple hours before the event happened while people were getting it set up and maybe a few early birds started showing up. And so they would take a picture of the stadium or the seating area, and, there'd be, 100 people in there and a stadium that can fit 10,000. And then they would say this was the Trump event, and they would just sequence manipulate that, well, this was taken a couple hours after when it was really taken. This was taken during Trump's speech. It was during the main event, when the reality is that the picture was taken early. But just by shifting when they told you that picture was taken, they've changed the narrative. Well, nobody's interested in Trump and all this stuff, and it's just he has no support and all that. So just watch for that. It's everywhere that I'm looking now. Now that I've kind of been able to categorize it, I'm seeing it over and over and over again.
This next example is something that is an entire category that's happened many times over the last 8 months. Is they would show rioters, and they'd say that the riots were responses to over-the-top police actions. They'd show a police officer arresting someone and tackling them to the ground and saying, that's the moment that the people became violent because they were responding to an abuse of power by the police. What they don't show was what predicated the arrest of that person. was that there was already a violent riot. People's businesses were being destroyed, people were being attacked, and the police were being attacked. And then the police responded. They'd show the federal police officers coming out of the federal building that was actively being attacked and them trying to burn it down. And they say the police arresting people was what instigated the violence, even though they were coming out because they tried to set the building on fire. They would put the sequence of actions out of order to make it look like the riots were justified.
Yeah. And
peaceful protests.
Yeah, and there's countless. I was thinking of a whole bunch while you were saying that. I just decided to hold my tongue because there is countless examples during the riots that during the BLM riots where the media would just blatantly, again, not by a whole lot, but they would take these sequences of events and just shift them around a little bit, and all of a sudden there's a brand new timeline and a brand new cause and effect relationship, and all of a sudden it fits their narrative, when the reality is that it didn't. And this stuff's hard to pin down too, because it requires you to be actively looking at first-hand sources. You won't be able to tell. The only reason why we were able to tell that there was sequence manipulation on Trump's speech was because there was a lot of first-hand videographers there taking video of both Trump and other people that were at the Capitol riot taking video. And then much, much later, by comparing those firsthand sources, we were able to see, oh, those timestamps don't line up. Same thing with AOC. Same thing with the vaccine is, well, we know just because we lived through it that the vaccine was developed before Biden said it was. Same thing with the officer that died more than a day after the riot from something unrelated to the riot. That requires firsthand sourcing. And that's hard to do. It's really hard to do. And it's hard to find the sources. And it'll only get, and it's hard to find the sources in the moment or even within the month after the moment. But they do this more and more and more. And as soon as you start getting a few months out, you're going to forget, or you're not going to be able to find it, or YouTube's going to scrub the video. And then, as Triumvirate said, just the fake news that they put out, that then becomes the history, and you lose all of that. I imagine
people
that
who write the history books are always the right ones.
Yeah. I imagine that if the right ever does get a handle on things, maybe in about 50 to 100 years, there'll probably be an entire industry of academics for rebuilding the correct timeline, trying to sort through all. If at some point in the future we realize what it is the left did, how much damage they did, how much misinformation they put out, and how much of that misinformation got woven into the history, there'll probably be an entire academic branch devoted to trying to rebuild the timeline.
They're playing the long game right now. They know that to change the culture, to get the revolution they want, they just need one generation to forget why America is America.
Yep. That's the problem. So
one generation.
And I don't know. I don't know what to do about it. I guess maybe we need like an alt Wikipedia that has like the real events, but there's not a good way to do it.
It's not one thing. It's many things, but all of them evolve around teaching the next generation.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, White Line just said it. But it's not just like you need to all become teachers. No, like you all have your own sphere of influence that you can affect. Some people will become teachers. Some people will just I influence people around me, right? You influence the people around you. You don't let the lies slip, because if you do, then it just becomes people's headcanon, right? Mm-hmm. Something they'll believe for the rest of their life. Now, another example the Triumvirate, the White Lion put out there was Benghazi, where they suggested the timeline for the whole event was starting at just a YouTube video that was unrelated, not including the actual context, all the months and months of history about the region that led up to the event in Benghazi. They said, oh, no, it all started with that video, not a few weeks before.
Yeah, and then during the entire event, there was a lot of sequence manipulation as to when Hillary knew and what she knew and what she did at the time. And that was an event where very, very quick paced. I think the event was started and was over the course of about 8 hours. And Hillary just kind of moved around what happened from her perspective by, a few minutes here, a half hour there. And all of a sudden, she became the good guy.
Han shot first.
Yeah, actually, that's a great one from fiction. As the Han Solo shooting first, is Disney literally sequence edited that to flip it, and the reason why they did that's actually a really good example from fiction. Is the reason why they did that was because the context of Han shooting first, they didn't like that because that made Han a murderer. But flipping it, making it so that Han,
He's a bad guy.
yeah, flipping the sequence changed the context, and all of a sudden Han is in self-defense, and it's justifiable for him to shoot. But that's it. That's a perfect example of that kind of highlights what it is I'm talking about. They're trying to take this so that it flips the context to the narrative that they're trying to put, so that it makes them the good guys instead of in the original context they're the bad guys. But if you just change that sequence, and that one is too, where you're talking about a few seconds. You're just sequence manipulating a few seconds, and all of a sudden, you change the timeline. And that's another good example, too, about the generational thing, Dyer. You've got a lot of people from the previous generation who remember watching that in theaters, and they remember that Han shot first. But my generation, the millennials, we didn't see that the first time around. And by the time we started watching it, it was... well, Han shot second, and I didn't know. I didn't know for a long time until somebody, as kind of a Zoomer, boomer kind of a thing. It's like, no, Han shot first in the original. And it was like, oh, well, I didn't know that. And it only took a generation to forget that. Luckily, there were still a few survivors that remembered that. But you run that out another 75 years, no one's going to remember that Han ever shot first. There won't be anybody.
His arc, because the whole point was he wasn't a good guy who actually had a change of character. He became better and actually started fighting for something other than personal gain. He had killed people in the past. He was a smuggler who had killed people, innocent people. He wasn't a good guy. He was actually a criminal, and that he had a change of character. He had a character arc. This newfangled thing where, you actually had a development of a story where a character is flawed and becomes better, learns something, develops, right? They kind of removed that by making him so he was always just this angel of a character, right?
Yeah. And then there's a tranny robot in his ship, isn't there?
Yeah, the brain of the tranny robot that was also a revolutionary who wanted to free all robots becomes a permanent prisoner inside of a ship without the ability to speak ever again. Hilarious.
Awesome. Alrighty. Well, hopefully you guys understood what we were going at there. I think that was a good segment. What do you think, Dyer?
Yeah, I think we didn't go too far off the rails.
Well, if we did go too far off the rails, I can just sequence manipulate this later, and then we didn't. It was the audience. The audience was going off the rails.
Yes, it was the white line. He took us off the rails.
Another example of sequence manipulation is when I stumble over reading something because Dyer wrote it horribly or misspelled something or just put gobbledygook onto it.
That never happened.
And then after I've read it and stumbled and looked like an idiot, Dyer goes back and edits it the right way so that he switched the sequence of events. That it was just me. He wrote it well the first time, and then I said it bad the first time. So,
yep, exactly.
They're like virtual rails. Shadow Wolf. Alrighty. So, next story?
Yes.
Next story has no slide because Direwolf hates you.
What?
I don't know. Do I need to I probably need to close it and reopen it, I bet.
There should be a slide there. Yeah. There is a slide there.
Oh, there is a slide there. It's because I already went to presenter view when you edited it. Okay.
I was... Sorry.
Okay, so recently there was a bit of a kerfuffle with Australia and Facebook that you may or may not have heard of. Recently, Australian news providers, emergency services, government organizations, I believe nonprofits, churches, medical advice and hospital pages as well, were all blocked on Facebook. Facebook no longer was your source or destination for this much needed information.
I'm glad Facebook has finally joined the rest of the world in hating Australia because, screw that, right?
Well, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous to try to read these articles upside down. I mean, that must be difficult. So some of the Australian government health departments and emergency service pages had their Facebook accounts restored after Facebook was notified that these were much needed pages. Why did they do this, Dyer? It's because Facebook hates kangaroos.
Yes, they hate Australia. No. So why would they do this? Well, probably not why many of you think they did it. If you listen to the hot takes from most of the conservative media, other than ourselves, this is actually not a case of political censorship. And if you jump to has to be political censorship, without actually looking at the reasons why it was done, then you're just doing the whole blue F bad thing, and that's not actually factual. So you gotta look at the real reason why they did it before you make form an opinion about it. So Australia's government and news media
joke pirates me in real time to his audience.
I left your joke and then I copied it.
Oh my god. Hates you. You're so awful.
Guilty. So
I'm gonna link text you on my jokes.
If this was if this was political censorship, by the way, it's not like Australia's government or news media is conservative.
Yeah, they've got their government institutes some pretty heavy censorship already. So
right. So it is ridiculous to assume that the left-wing Facebook is at odds with the extremely far left-wing Australia. The real reason is that Australia said that they're going to pass the link tax.
So what is a link tax? So this link tax thing is something that's been tossed around the EU and Australia for a couple of years now. And what I found interesting after Facebook dropped a lot of these pages from the Australian market was that so many conservatives and libertarians were upset about it. And they were just saying, oh, well, Facebook's too powerful. They shouldn't be able to do this. Like, why do they hate Australia? And they kept missing. And I was really disappointed because there was some big names, big outlets that were, especially on the conservative side, that were missing the point that Facebook was doing this in response to the link tax. So the link tax, a couple of years ago, the EU, it had been talked about in America, but the EU is actually working on legislation for it, is that when you share a link to a news article on Facebook and Twitter, Facebook and Twitter will generate what is called a preview, where when you share the link, it'll automatically pull in the headline and, a little bit of the first paragraph. So somebody looking at your post, they can kind of get a little preview of what that article is, and then they can decide if they want to click on it or not. So this has been... this will be articles from like CNN and legacy media, like the newspapers, a lot of newspapers moving to online, obviously, because newspapers kind of dead, but the online ones aren't. But if these online newspapers are having their links shared out and they're not actually getting the traffic sent out to them. So if I'm looking on Facebook, which I never would because I'm not on Facebook, and I see some articles, I might read through the headlines, which a lot of people do. I might read through a few of the sentences and realize, I'm not really that interested in reading it, so I'm going to keep on scrolling and not click on the link. Now, I've actually taken a little bit of information out of that article, but since I didn't click on it, the newspaper that owns that article, that wrote and published that article, they didn't get any traffic directed to their website, which affects how much money they can get on ad revenue and all kinds of other stuff. For instance, a different way might be that if it was just the raw hyperlink that didn't have, this preview in it, maybe I would be forced to click on it, and I'd actually have to drive traffic to their website to see what the article is about, and whether I liked it or not, it doesn't matter because I've already driven traffic to their website. So a lot of the legacy media outlets have seen this preview thing that Facebook and Twitter and other social media use as something that is massively affecting their bottom line because it's massively tanking the amount of traffic that is going to these websites.
Boo-hoo.
Yes, sorry. Google's actually much more egregious, where Google News will actually pull most of the whole article, and you can actually view and read most of a whole article in Google News without having clicked on it and not generating any traffic from them at all. Now, in my opinion, the preview's okay. The thing Google's doing is definitely probably stealing. But either way, what the legacy media outlets have tried to do is they've banded together in the EU. They're working on the US, but maybe it'll work in the US now that there's a liberal full all three branches. Yes, I do consider the Supreme Court to be a liberal Supreme Court. They've banded together and said, well, this is sinking our newspapers. The newspapers were already sinking. We tried to go online, but now because of this link preview thing, we're sinking again. We can't get any traffic generated. So we think that Facebook and Twitter and Google and all these other social media sites, if they're using our links to generate previews, they need to be paying a fee to the newspaper.
Hold up. So Fox News is profitable, is it not?
I don't know. Probably.
They are. And it was a rhetorical question, sorry. So Fox News has the same online presence. They have a TV show, but their online news articles do generate funds. They are profitable. So what's the difference between them and these other news agencies? Maybe that they
well, no.
They
so you're looking at
because they're not good.
Well, so you're also not just like legacy media, but also your kind of web media, so like HuffPo and stuff like that, where like they only have an online presence and they don't have a news channel or anything like that. I don't think Fox News is the one that's driving this. This is more like a New York Times or a Bloomberg or Washington Post or Huffington Post. Those kinds of websites are the ones that are trying to band together to get this link tax, because they're not getting they're much more dependent on the traffic than somebody like a Fox News or a CNN is. So a lot of when this link tax was proposed, so again, it's trying to be basically like a bailout for the legacy media, or the online only media. A lot of these newspapers are media outlets that just put out trash anyways. But they're trying to stay afloat by having this link tax and having Facebook and Google just funnel them, maybe a penny or a quarter of a penny or something like that every time a link is shared out. That would add up really, really quickly. And I'm not necessarily saying that maybe they shouldn't push for it. I don't support it, but most of the reason why I don't support it is because I don't think that if something like Huffington Post can't survive, I don't care.
That's what I'm saying, is I think they should be allowed to fail because they're not doing something that's profitable.
Yeah. Now, eventually, it's going to be Facebook's problem that they don't have any news outlets that can share information because they've strangled them all. And, that is a problem. And so there's a lot of debate back and forth on this. But generally, a lot of people, because one of the things the EU did was, in addition to the link tax, they were going to try to say, well, if you can't pay that out, then you can't share out links, which fundamentally breaks the internet. The internet is about sharing links. That's how the entire internet is structured, by having links that you click on that navigate you to the next page. That's how the whole internet works. And smaller sites, maybe Facebook could pay out, a couple million a month for having links be shared out. Maybe they could eat that. They probably could. But something smaller like, Direwolf Media or any other startup, or something like a Patreon or a Parler, like a new social media. They wouldn't be big enough to eat that cost of paying out these link taxes. And you would also have to devote part of your company. You have to devote resources and coding and all kinds of stuff to tracking the link tax. You have to figure out, okay, where are these links actually going? Who do I owe the money? How do I figure all this stuff out? So the legislation was difficult to implement for the companies, and it kind of precludes new companies, new startups from getting onto the scene. And it, in general, even if it does work, all it's doing is getting more money to these trash garbage news sites. So, because, if Dyer and I, they're not going to be, if they did pass a link tax, like Direwolf Media is not getting link tax. Like, we're not going to be getting money from Facebook if you guys share out a Direwolf Media link. Like, that's never going to happen. This would only be for the big dogs, or the big wolves.
We have links on Twitter. It shows a preview of our stream, does it not?
Yeah.
And it shows a preview of our articles when I do occasionally publish an article. I feel like if your preview of your article doesn't get someone to actually click it and read it, then you aren't owed the ad revenue anyways.
Yeah.
Because they didn't see ads on your page.
Yeah.
They actually weren't interested enough in your article. They just went by it. They passed by it, not interested in it. So
yeah, it doesn't really matter anyways. So I use an ad blocker.
Right.
So now they've kind of described what it is. When this when this was proposed a few years ago, a lot of people on the right were against it. A lot of right-wing people, a lot of libertarians were against this because it was going to make stuff way too complicated. Didn't like it. And so that's why I thought it was really weird this week when this happened in Australia. You had a lot of people on the right wing and libertarian spheres were saying, oh my God, Facebook can't do this. This is terrible. How dare they? When really what Facebook was doing was saying Australia is going to pass a law that says that Facebook has to pay out, potentially millions of dollars out to all of these media companies just for doing what they normally do anyways. And Facebook said, well, that's fine. You guys can pass that legislation, but we don't want to pay that money, so we're just disabling all of these newspaper websites, and then now you can't share links on Facebook about them in Australia. And so there's a lot of argument this week about, well, it's crazy that Facebook's so big that they can do that. Facebook shouldn't be able to challenge a government like that. And yeah, I can see some of the efficacy of that. But if you have a government that's about to pass a regulation and it's saying, well, we're going to pass this regulation that says that, these specific companies, they're going to have to pay out millions of dollars to these other companies. I mean, I think that the obvious effect of that is that the companies that you're saying have to pay out is they're going to just say, well, fine, we won't do business in your country. Like, not a big deal. This is a very classic taxation problem where the left will say, ooh, look at that industry. It's doing really well. We should tax it and try and skim off the top. Whereas the right's going to say, well, if you tax it, you're going to, maybe that industry is going to decide it's not worth doing business here anymore. And that does tend to happen if you're overtaxing a certain industry or if you're overtaxing, the billionaire class, stuff like that. You see people who they will figure out how to do the least possible to stay under that tax because they don't want the taxes too burdensome. They'll just close up shop. We had that with government regulations, which are, a kind of another kind of tax where you've got these strangling government regulations that are causing entire industries to close up shop, like the car industry, and just move it overseas. It's a lot easier to do it overseas than it is to do it in America. Government wants to regulate all that stuff. Great. We just won't do it here. And Facebook says Australia wants to regulate our stuff. Great. We just won't do Facebook in Australia. So while it is crazy that Facebook's that big, I don't think that they're in the wrong here. Facebook's in the wrong a lot of other times, a lot of other places, almost
we don't need to
universally.
invent reasons for them to be wrong.
Yeah.
They're wrong plenty on their own.
Yeah, but I just think that the right-wing commentary failed this week to properly identify what was going on here, and I think it's a good thing that Facebook spooked the hell out of Australia and actually caused them some real harm in removing this, because now you're going to have the Australian people saying, well, fuck the government, like, we're going to vote to reverse this. And you're going to have the EU. The EU is going to be a lot more skittish to implement their version of a link tax now that they realize, well, Facebook's going to blow out the entire EU, which would be crazy. That's a lot bigger of a user base in Australia. And
not like they have an
America,
option, they'd have to.
Yeah, and America as well. America, the Democrats might be a lot more hesitant to implement this link tax if Facebook's going to say, well, we just won't have any news sites on Facebook in America. And it also, Facebook doing this, it opens the door for companies like Twitter and Google to say the same thing. Just saying, well, if you guys want to pass regulations on this, we'll just pull services from your country. And again, there's a big problem with having companies that are that big that are able to sway what a government is going to decide to do just out of fear. That is a problem, but I think it's also a problem for the government to be instituting these kinds of regulations in the first place. So we have two really bad actors that are duking it out. And my favorite bad actor in this one is Facebook.
Though I gotta say, it's nice that we have some non-essential countries to test these bad policies for us to all learn from.
Yeah, it's funny. After Facebook disabled Facebook in Australia, it took them like a good 5 minutes to download that there was no more Facebook. It's just that buffer time. Because the internet in Australia sucks.
All right. So yeah, Facebook sucks, but not for this.
All righty. Next story. So,
be gone from me, you soy boy beta cock. The transaction is complete.
There once was a girl from Nantucket, had a chicken but too weak to pluck it. She got tired of farming and joined with the army, but couldn't do 9 tuckets.
That was beautiful, Triumvirate. Absolutely beautiful.
It was better when I read it.
Yeah, thank you for the $10. Much appreciated. Great poem. All right. Our next story is the entire school board of Oakley, California resigned on the same day. I did not know this. I'm interested to read more. All the members of an Oakley area school board resigned days after they were heard making disparaging comments about parents at a virtual board meeting that they didn't realize was being broadcast to the public. Oof. The 4 members of the Oakley Union Elementary School Board had stepped down by Friday amid growing outrage with the board's meeting on Wednesday. Before the meeting officially began, and unaware the public could see and hear them, they used profanity and made jokes about parents just wanting babysitters or wanting to smoke pot in their homes.
So they're saying basically, now I watched the entire video to make sure that the video we're about to watch, which is cut, is not out of context. It is not, and I will give you more context after we play the video. This is some news coverage with a super cut of the objectionable statements.
We watch all of it?
Just the first part.
I believe what I'm gonna say. I believe what I'm gonna share will answer a lot of that, and then.
Yeah. So 9 is gonna go before 7.
No, 9 is public comment on non-agendized items.
Oh, okay.
And so we have 0 public comment on non-agendized items.
Oh.
All the public comment is related to agendized items.
Oh,
I think is that the 8-minute one?
So we'll just say
Yeah.
So 12.
6.0 will add.
Supposed to be a
sorry.
3-minute one.
It's the one you put in the notes, bud.
Okay, well, this is the video. What they're going to end up saying
Is it the one that's in the source that you wanted me to play?
might have been. Yeah, I'm pulling up right now to make sure it is.
No,
but,
they're both 8-minute videos.
Okay.
Send me a copy of the one that you want me to play.
Don't worry about it. Let's discuss it. So this is the video. It's someone recording with their phone of the meeting. At the very end of the meeting, they realize, oh, we're broadcasting to the public, and then it goes offline. So what they said was they were talking about receiving public comments. Because right now, the California school boards in a lot of cities are getting lots of angry parents messaging them. And they're like, you know what? Instead of having a parent come to us in person or call in directly, we'll give them a phone line where they can call in and they have exactly 3 minutes to talk and they get cut off. And then we can see if we want to post it or not, right? And they were talking about that. And then they started mocking the parents for complaining about the schools being shut down still. Saying that the reason why they want to open the schools again is because they want to have a babysitter or because they just want to smoke pot. And that was the context. So that's why everyone got angry with them and immediately called for their ouster. So for a little more context about what's going on in California, they have been holding out. So the governor is trying to open the schools, and he wanted to open them by the 16th of February. But the school union, who these people are likely very much a part of, because they're part of the school, has been saying they oppose the proposed legislation to open the schools, and the government, the state government, was willing to even pay like $700 or more for every single student to the schools so that they could open. They're trying to bribe the schools to open by giving them additional grant money per a student. And the teacher is saying it's too fast and it's not enough money. So they were basically angling to get more money out of the government before they're holding the kids hostage, not letting the kids go to school because they wanted more money. And that's why everyone was angry. And their response to people being angry about them trying to get more money out of the government was to mock them and call them potheads who just wanted babysitters rather than someone to actually educate their children, for which these people are getting paid to do. Now, we've talked about it last time. These people are already getting paid a salary like they would any other year to educate children, but they're not doing it.
In a school district in Oakley, I can see here it says it's on 91 Mercedes Lane. I sincerely doubt that the school is hurting for money.
No, it's not. No, it is not at all. The bill was going to offer $450 to $700 per student to make sure that there was in-person instruction. So, yeah, I'm very much glad these people are out. These people are actually members of the group who are not allowing California children to go back to school. The governor wants to send the kids back to school. They're not letting him. The school unions.
I'm
like
so
a group of
torn
school
on this
unions-
because, I mean, when the kids go back to school, what are they going to do? Like, they're just going to talk about how, like, white people are bad.
Okay, California schools do suck. But we are paying taxes, they are paying taxes to the government to provide public schools, right?
Maybe the thing that needs to be fixed is they just need to go into the city board and say, well, why don't we just, schools are already shut. The opportunity cost of shutting them down permanently doesn't seem to be very high. Why don't we just shut them down permanently?
Well, the government also is not allowing them to go to any other school, even private schools. They're not allowed to go to school.
That seems like a violation of civil rights.
Well, yeah, that's the problem. That's why everyone's angry. And then the governor, who actually is on the side of the people saying, yeah, let people go back to school, is trying to bribe the schools to open up again. And the unions are saying, no, we want more money.
I seem to remember in a previous era when the schools said that people were not allowed to attend school. We just sent in the National Guard to make sure that they were allowed to attend school. Maybe if we had a different president, we could have tried that again.
So, yes, some schools are doing distance learning, but that is not the same as in-person learning. It's not as good as in-person learning. For one thing, school is a valuable place for kids to learn social skills and being around other kids, and they actually have more of their attention on the lessons than when they're distracted at home. Now, unless you actually have a parent who's actively being the teacher, which is an option, but that's not what's going on here. So, when my kids were in distance learning, it was actually only like 3 hours maximum out of the day, whereas they usually would be at school for a lot longer.
I don't know. I'm still torn.
Okay, I know you don't like the schools in California, but there's definitely something corrupt about the teachers holding the students hostage to get more money.
Oh, I definitely agree with that.
It's something pretty twisted about that. So they're all out of a job now. Here's what I would have done. If the teachers refused to go, I would fire every last one of them and bring in teachers who would be willing to do it.
That's illegal too. The union laws.
I don't care. Fire all of them. They're not doing their job.
Why would you do that?
Ha, that's good timing.
Slowpoke here is $2. Says hot take. These parents are in fact potheads for letting their kids go to public schools. Fuck public schools. I see the story as advertising for homeschooling. Well, I mean, not everybody's got that's expensive. Not everybody's got the money to do that. I mean, my opinion is that you should move to what?
I'm actually opposed to people taxing people to send them to bad schools.
Well, I know that's what I'm saying. We need to have school choice, and then realistically, I mean, you need to live in an area where, or if you're having kids, you need to move to an area that has schools that you can rely on. I mean, if you are in a position where you can homeschool or pay the money to send your kids to a private school, that's fantastic. Not everybody can do that, though.
I agree. Though this doesn't allow them to do any other school, even not public schools.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways.
Did we talk last week about the National Guard being deployed forever?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to remind everybody the National Guard is going to be deployed in D.C. until
D.C.
the
is
fall.
fan.
Yeah, well, they're going to be deployed there until the fall. Now, it wasn't clarified as to whether the fall is talking about autumn or where it's talking about, like, the fall in all capitals, like the fall of America. I tend to think the latter, but
It's one of the two, for sure.
It's definitely one of the two. Alrighty. So our next story is...
This story I wrote a long time ago.
It is hard being super freaking rich. Okay, so we are criticizing billionaires in general is the new blackface. It is? Wow. So Washington Post published a satirical article this week titled, was it satirical?
It was satirical.
Okay.
But everyone thought it was serious. They just read the headline and thought it was serious.
Okay, they published a satirical article this week titled, "Is Criticizing Billionaires the New Wearing Blackfaced?" First, no, this article did not argue that criticizing billionaires is the new racism. Or the new Trudeauism. The article sardonically mocked the outrage over the criticism of billionaires, suggesting that anyone that becomes that wealthy, they must be doing it at the expense of the poor. They mock the idea that of admiring a wealthy person and seeing them as experts for being wealthy. It also mocks Howard Schultz, who speaks of billionaires as being victims of unfair ire, suggesting that calling them billionaires is a slur, and that they should be called people of means. Wow.
Clearly, Schultz is an idiot. We're not going to call billionaires people of means. It's just adding more words.
So was that part actually true? Somebody actually said that?
Yes, Howard Schultz.
Okay.
So they were mocking him, which is true. He is an idiot.
Okay.
The wealthy are not an oppressed class, categorically. This article makes the mistake of assuming all wealthy people are the same, however. The truth is that some people are wealthy because they are experts. That sometimes does happen. If you are providing a service.
Nah, most of the people that are billionaires, they're making that money in the financial markets, and the financial markets are just made up stuff now. If you're a millionaire, you probably made a good product. If you are a billionaire, I'm going to go ahead and say that more likely than not, you're making that money in the stock market, doing booms and busts and causing a recession and depression.
I think that
every
you'll
10
probably
years.
agree we probably should judge each person based on their individual merits and not.
I don't know. I don't know how you make $1 billion without having played the financial markets. There's a couple that I can say did. I would say that Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, Bill Gates. There's probably a few others. I would say that they all made their billions legitimately, but the rest of them, I would say no. Anybody who's a billionaire, more than likely you're making it out of the market, and that is just you've made so much money that you can purchase the senators and House members that are making the market policy, and then you use the rest of your money to invest in that policy, and then you make even more money because the Fed just keeps printing and printing and printing, and you are where all that money pools at. So I that's what I think about the billionaires, to be honest.
Well, Fox, can you say just because someone has that amount of money that they definitely didn't produce a product that would?
Well, no, I just listed out a bunch of exceptions, and I said there's probably more, but in general,
so then you're agreeing with the point. Then is that
yes.
Just saying that someone's a billionaire thus automatically means that they have victimized people and that they don't know what they're talking about is also a fallacy. Same as fallacy to say that because they have money, they're an expert. They made the exact same fallacy in the opposite. Someone having money does not determine their knowledge of a subject or their lack of it, or that whether or not they produced a
voracious.
product.
Is Musk a billionaire? I don't think he's a billionaire yet.
Though I do point out that I think this article was including both billionaires and millionaires in the same.
Yeah. I think you can pretty easily make millions being a very productive member of society, creating real products. I definitely think you can, but when you get up in the billions, you start playing games. Alrighty.
So many wealthy people, because they provided a livelihood to many people, are not victimizing them. So another argument was that just because you have a lot of money, you must have gained it by victimizing someone. A lot of people who are very wealthy, they're wealthy because they have large companies that employ and provide for a lot of people. They're not victimizing them. And if they had not created those companies, then they would have not provided those jobs and livelihoods for many people. So the assumption that because you're wealthy, you are automatically a victimizer of the society is also a flaw. They chant "Eat the Rich" as they burn down a local business that has done nothing wrong. Is an example. They're burning down people like not even we're talking millionaires and billionaires here. We're talking like someone who owns a franchisee, right? So
well, yeah. I mean, that's the other problem. Is like the left will talk about the billionaires and the millionaires, except for Bernie Sanders, but like their boots on the ground will attack the thousandaires.
Exactly. So they're using this argument of, oh, all billionaires and millionaires are victimizing society. They take that argument and then they go down, burn down a thousandaire, like you said. So that was the flaw I saw in this article, was they were using this sardonic wit, which was funny. Yeah. Howard Schultz is an idiot, right? But
triumvirate, those damn billionaires who make $120,000 a year.
But the base of their entire article, under all the jokes, was to say that it is immoral to be wealthy.
Yes. Okay, so the problem with this article isn't that it's pathologically defended billionaires. Did you write this?
That it pathologically defended billionaires, as the title suggests. So it sounds like, from the title of their article, that they're defending billionaires pathologically.
Yes.
But it actually supports a pathological hatred of billionaires and millionaires.
Gotcha.
That's the problem with it.
That is a problem.
All right, short one.
Let's see here. Do we get a slide?
Does he like how sad that rich guy looks?
Yes. He lost it all in the GME squeeze.
Yeah.
Do we want to do this last story?
I don't think we have time.
Okay. I can do a quick update on the GME though, if you want, just out of memory. So we had so this week was the hearing about there was a Senate hearing about the events around the GameStop stonks epic.
To the moon.
There was it was a Senate Finance Committee hearing, which was chaired by Maxine Waters. So a lot of fun there. And the people that were testifying was Roaring Kitty, also known as Deep Fucking Value.
He said he wasn't a cat, by the way, during
yes,
the
he did
hearing.
say that he was not a cat. We also had the Robinhood CEO, a CEO from Melvin Capital, and I think somebody on the executive board of Citadel Capital. So it was a pretty and then there was I think there was somebody from the SEC. I couldn't tell who she was from, but she seemed to be somebody from the agencies. So it was an interesting day on Congress. I didn't watch anywhere close to all of it. There was probably, I think it went for about 5 hours. It was a lot of testimony. I might go back and rewatch some of it, but I just kind of skipped around a little bit trying to see, kind of get an idea of what was going on. And it was crazy because at random, I probably listened to about 20 minutes total, but just skipping around a little bit. Just randomly picking 20 minutes out of a 5-hour clip. I saw some interesting things, which makes me think that the rest of it's probably pretty interesting too. So among the things that I saw was you had So Citadel and Robinhood, their relationship is that if you have a transaction through Robinhood, Citadel is actually processing that transaction. They're processing your order for stock. So Citadel and Robinhood have a very tight relationship. Citadel also owns Melvin Capital. So one of the congressmen asked Citadel, did you at any point talk to at any point after January 1st through now, did you talk to Robinhood? Did anyone at Citadel talk to Robinhood about GameStop? And the guy from Citadel said no. And that's pretty bold because the senator actually said, he's like, I'm going to give you a second chance on that. If I subpoenaed everybody at your company, would I get the same answer? And the Citadel guy doubled down and said, yes. So I want to explain to you why that's so crazy. Because Citadel processes Robinhood's transactions. The reason why Robinhood had to suspend trading of GameStop and the other stocks was because Robinhood was undercapitalized. They didn't have enough capital to back up those transactions if something were to go wrong on the market. There's whole really complicated where they have to have a reserve ratio for all that stuff. But all you need to know is that Citadel needs to have enough capital on hand to process those transactions. And they didn't have enough to process the big volume of GameStop that was going through, and that's why they suspended it. Citadel is the company that capitalizes Robinhood. So Robinhood can't process their transactions through Citadel because they haven't gotten capitalized high enough from Citadel. And GameStop's the thing that is triggering this. I mean, this is like one of the biggest events since the 2007 crash. This is probably one of the biggest, most interesting events on Wall Street since the 2007 crash. That was so, and all of this is centered around GameStop. And Citadel, at the just absolute center of this thing, said, no, we did not. We are testifying to Congress under penalty of perjury that no, we did not have any communications at all the whole year of 2021 with Robinhood about GameStop. The same stock that we would capitalize them for and reprocessing their transactions for them, and they had to pull it off the market because they were running out of money. And when they asked us, we told them no. Like that one. And also our subsidiary that was getting hosed by the short squeeze on GameStop. We definitely did not 100% didn't talk to Robinhood about GameStop. That is the biggest load of bullshit I've ever heard. Like,
they couldn't have done their job.
Yeah, now somebody in Congress has to follow up on that and actually do these subpoenas, or the SEC does. Somebody needs to. That is the most difficult to believe thing I've ever heard. It is so difficult to believe that.
I hope they subpoena the company.
I do too.
That discovery would be hilarious.
What's that?
Discovery on that would be hilarious.
Oh, yeah. Then there was this another side where Robinhood they're talking about how much Robinhood was making, and they were basically asking, is like, how much money are you making off of your users versus how much money did they kind of like, miss out on because you stopped processing their GameStop transactions. And Robinhood put out they volunteered the number. The Robinhood CEO just threw out the number $34 billion of unrealized gain. That's how much Robinhood has, quote unquote, made this year since the beginning of the year. So the congressman asked, or the senator asked, followed up, said, okay, like, so $34 billion of unrealized gain, but what is that based off of? So when you're talking in financial terms, the amount of money that you get back from an investment, that's important to an extent, but what you're really looking for is the rate of return. So if $34 billion is, if the Robinhood was valued at, $100 billion, then, and they made $34 billion on top of that, then they had a 34% rate of return, which is great. But if they had like $1 trillion that they were basing that off of, well, then that $34 billion, that's only, a few fractions of a percent. It's really not a big deal. And so it's really important to know what is that rate of return? If Robinhood is making 100, 200, 300% off of their user base, that doesn't look real good. It looks real good for Robinhood because it sounds like they're really profitable. But from like a moral standpoint, it doesn't really look that great for them to be testifying that. And that's why they wouldn't testify what that rate of return was. It was probably pretty high because that was why they wouldn't say what it was. But the congressperson kept asking him a couple different ways, like, well, why can't you tell us what the rate of return is? And the Robinhood CEO kept saying, oh, we're not allowed to, that's not public information. Like, we're not going to be able to say that out publicly. It was deflecting it. And the senator kept pointing out, like, well, you volunteered that $34 billion number, but as a finance guy that $34 billion doesn't mean a whole lot unless I can calculate out what the rate of return is. And so they kept going back and forth on that. And what I thought was funny and a little bit sad, the senators that were asking questions were actually like decently smart on finance stuff. It's very, very surprising. Definitely wasn't like the tech hearings. But what I thought was interesting is Robinhood's a publicly traded company, and the rate of return, what I would have done as a Robinhood CEO is not said, what was my rate of return during the GameStop fiasco? I would have said, what is my company's cash conversion rate? How much cash does Robinhood spend versus how much are they getting back for it? If they're spending $1, how many dollars are they getting back? If they're getting back another $1, then that's a 0% cash conversion. If they pay $1 and they get back $2, then you've got 100% cash conversion. That's a pretty good ratio. And that's what they were basically asking. What I would have done as a Robinhood CEO, instead of deflecting it and making myself look like an idiot or a jackass, I would have just said, well, the publicly available numbers is our cash conversion ratio, and that's such and such and such. So you can look at the 34 billion and kind of reverse calculate it from there. That's what I would have said if I was him. And the senator should have known to ask that, because in financial terms, the rate of return and the cash conversion ratio, they can be, in the context of the question, they were more or less equivalent measures. And had the senator been a little bit sharper, or maybe one of his aides been a little bit sharper, they probably could have looked up that number, and then they could have gotten back to the Robinhood CEO and say, well, this is what your cash conversion ratio is. Like, do you think that currently you guys are overperforming or underperforming that number for that 34 billion? So there was just a lot of like weird, again, this is just real small microcosm, and there was just the most fascinating things were packed into it of just 20 minutes of skipping around a 5-hour clip. So all kinds of crazy stuff. We'll see if that actually goes anywhere. I liked that Roaring Kitty is sitting there with a what kind of mic did he have? It was some like real popular. It was Razer. Yeah, it was a Razer mic. He was in his gaming chair and all that stuff. He had a good testimony talking about a lot. He's been getting demonized a lot in the public. In his opening statement, he had some testimony about how his family was just worse than dirt poor growing up, and always in poverty, and talking about some of his childhood growing up in that, and hunger and things like that. And then he's able to hit it big, just like the big rich guys do. And now he's getting demonized for it, because how dare he crawl out of that hole?
Exactly. Stay in your hole where you belong, little person. So, jeez. All right. Hey, it's been a great show. Thank you guys. We'll see you maybe Wednesday, definitely next Saturday. No. We're going to see you guys on Tuesday. Do you remember why we're going to see you on Tuesday, Dyer? See you next Tuesday. Are you insulting me right now? No. No, do you remember why? Do you remember what we're doing on Tuesday? We're doing what are we doing? Forget. State of the Union! Oh, yeah, State of the Union. Yeah. See you next Tuesday's cunt. Yes. All right. Yes, we'll do Tuesday then. You're right. Yeah, so we'll see you guys on Tuesday for the State of the Union. Looking forward to it. And if the State of the Union is for some reason not on Tuesday and it is on Wednesday, then I will go back and edit this clip to make sure that I was right and Dyer was wrong. But whenever the State of the Union is, we'll be streaming that day. See you guys. Have a good weekend. All right, we'll